honor to be here, and I want to congratulate all of you for your 30-year anniversary. It seems like an amazing organization. This has been my first time here, but I do want to congratulate you because in serving with the Epilepsy Foundation and starting to see the 50 affiliates around the country, we have some that are very strong, and this clearly looks to be one of the stronger ones that we have, and I want to congratulate you on that. You may not realize the impact that you have on epilepsy patients, but there's a number of neurologists here tonight, and they see these patients every day and see what kind of difference education does make in patients who have epilepsy and their families. So we really appreciate the support that they're providing also. You're all probably sitting back saying, gee, it's a Friday night at 9 o'clock, and probably on my top 10 wish list was sitting here listening to a neurologist named BS for a few minutes, but I'll keep it brief. One of the reasons I get asked to talk to various foundations is on the issue of epilepsy has been my personal experience. Yes, I am an epileptologist or a neurologist who specializes in epilepsy, but my first interaction occurred much earlier in life. I was a teenager, and I was starting to get these weird things happening. We might refer to them as a brain warp. And I remember I was dating this young lady. I was 16 at the time, and I could kind of feel this happening in my head, and I must have looked kind of strange because she would say, hey, what's the matter? And it was very kind of her, and she was caring. Well, and I was a good Roman Catholic boy and talked nicely, but for some reason I found her voice extremely irritating when she was asking me that question, and typically would respond in not a very nice answer that my mother would not like to hear. Nonetheless, these things kept happening, and never told anybody. I was a smart kid, but didn't know what they were, and what was I going to tell someone? I'm having this weird kind of feeling in my head. Played football in high school, and I remember my junior year as a high school football player, I made probably 2 tackles in a row and had no idea what planet I was on. And then if you looked at the video, they did have video back then, everybody's getting in the huddle and I'm walking down the other side of the field. So they take me off and assume I got hit in the head or something. And back in those days, you didn't worry about concussion. You just kind of put some ice on the back of the neck and said, okay, let's see how you do. And I'm sitting at the bus at halftime, and I'm looking around, and I had no idea who these strange characters were, dressed up in all these funny uniforms. And I'm just kind of sitting there watching. By the time the second half comes around, I'm back to normal. I went out and finished the game. It was a good old college try. Finally, I'm in the car with I have a twin brother and a brother who is 9 months older. That Roman Catholic family, it's called the rhythm method, you know, it does work. And we pull into the high school parking lot for an event, and I get out of the vehicle, and of course that's the last thing I remember. And I have my first grand mal seizure. My brother, older brother, who was 9 months older, of course, he was worried I was going to swallow my tongue, tried to stick his finger in my mouth, and almost lost his finger. And my first evaluation as they wheeled me in the gurney, I don't remember this, but I sat up on the gurney apparently, and I said, now wait, stop. And these ambulance attendants said, what's going on here? And apparently I pull out my comb my hair, put it back and say, okay, I'm all right now. And of course, their next response, he's on drugs, which I wasn't. Nonetheless, the workup was done, everything came back negative, put on a medication, kind of went on my merry way. Really didn't understand the whole process very well. Somehow or another, I ended up in medical school. And I remember having these weird feelings again. I was on this medicine I wasn't supposed to be having them. And this was like 8 months into medical school. So I went to my primary care doctor, that's what you're supposed to do. And he goes, I think you're a little anxious about medical school. I said, I'm 8 months into it, I'm doing fine, I'm not anxious now. So what does he do? He sends me to a psychiatrist. And I go to the psychiatrist, he goes, oh yeah, you need to be on Tofranol. And I just kind of ignored that and continued to go on and do my thing. For those of you who are in the medical field, once you get through medical school, or as you go through medical school, you have to decide what you're going to be. So I'm doing well in all these rotations, but of course I can't be a heart surgeon. I mean, what if I have a seizure, you know, during that operation? There's my career. So then I'm thinking, all right, where does this lead me? I could be a radiologist, I guess, and sit there and look at films, because if I have a seizure there, I'm not going to hurt anybody. But then I thought, okay, I liked emergency medicine, and being from downtown Detroit, you got lots of action. It was almost like a MASH unit down there. But that ran into some problems too, because you had to kind of react quickly. So then I'm thinking, could I go into where I could kind of sit there and kind of take my time and kind of look mysteriously up into the air. Neurology. There we go. So that was my field. Pick was neurology. My first, I guess, attempt or problem with how people with epilepsy were labeled, even before I got into medical school, I really didn't have a lot of cash flow. So I went to enlist in the Air Force. They said I was a great candidate. I was going to get my medical school paid for. So I went downtown Detroit and I had to do the saluting thing and meet all these people. Well, they said, you're a shoo-in, no problem. And about 6 weeks later, I get a letter from the Surgeon General saying, we don't fund that because anybody with a history of epilepsy since age 5, that was not it. So I ended up paying my way and making my road down through medical school. And then the decision was, okay, I'm already in neurology, how do I end up getting an epilepsy? Well, as I finished my residency, and this gives a little age, MRI had just kind of been coming out. And here I'd been on this medication for a number of years, doing completely fine. So I'm going to my first American Epilepsy Society meeting. And that's in Seattle, long trip. I probably was up late the night before, couldn't sleep well on a plane. On my way to my first American Epilepsy Society meeting, I have a seizure on the shuttle bus. And I wake up in a hotel room. Luckily, one of the colleagues sitting next to me from where I was working at Henry Ford in Detroit at the time. So I show up in the hotel room, I wake up, and I'm lying on this bed. Obviously, they got me up there somehow. And I had fractured my back in 3 places because of that harder seizure. And so tried to stay for the meeting. I kind of loaded myself with Tegretol, and you neurologists know you can't do that. You know, you throw a few pills in your mouth, and the level goes up quickly. And as I'm walking through the meeting trying to read posters, I'm seeing double, and I look ataxic like I drank too much. So I kind of packed it up from Seattle, flew back to Detroit, and knew I had to get this new MRI study done. And what I found was, or what they found, and they called me the next day when I was seeing patients in the clinic, was that I had a brain tumor. And that's what was the cause of this all, that had gone back many years, but they had missed it on CAT scan. So my next step was really trying to kind of see things from both sides of the fence, first from an epilepsy standpoint, but now going through the epilepsy surgery process. Which ended up being a left temporal resection. And those of you who know anatomy, left temporal you kind of need for naming. And if you recall, I recall very well the first couple of days trying to, you know, they were around me, what's this? I had no idea. I couldn't name a darn thing. And, but things heal and things get better. About 6 weeks later, after that temporal lobectomy, I had to take the neurology oral boards, where you go and you sit around and they give you all these questions. And of course, my hair has grown back now, so they can't really, they're not sure what happened to me. And they're sitting there and they give me a case of a TIA stroke, what's the workup, you know? And I'm sitting there, okay, well, you do this. And then, of course, what I wanted to tell them, I want to do a carotid Doppler study where you put that transducer on the carotid artery. I could not think of that word. I said, you know, where you rub that thing up and down the neck and these guys are all looking at each other. Luckily, that only happened twice throughout the whole day and I still passed. But it's been an interesting experience. And even looking not only from the layperson standpoint of what is epilepsy, but even in the medical world. I remember rounding as a resident and going in and seeing seizure patients and then standing out in the hallway. And what some of the comments the other residents said, oh yeah, this person's great. I mean, they didn't understand. A lot of people coming out of medical school training didn't understand there was more than just 1 or 2 seizure types. That seizures can come in all sizes and shapes. The last issue was, and how did I decide to actually be more vocal about it? Well, because this wasn't something I was sharing with people, and that's where our next speaker kind of comes in. This Congressman Coelho was actually at the American Epilepsy Society a number of years ago, and I had gotten asked to write a foreword for a book called Brainstorms by Steve Schechter. And he calls me and he says, well, I knew about your history. He goes, can you write this foreword for this book? And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not sure if I want to do this. This is my personal life kind of going out on print. And I had heard that Tony Coelho guy talk once. So I send him a letter, and I get this letter back, and he pretty much convinced me that part of why I was here in this world, and being an epilepsy specialist, but also having a history of epilepsy, was to really get out and educate and empower patients. Because without us doing that, there's a lot of bad things that can happen. So I encourage you all to take that same challenge. Again, I know there's a lot of neurologists here tonight, and I'm not trying to just focus on you, but I do want to say that you're a huge player in part of what the Epilepsy Foundation does and working with your local affiliate. And that's very much appreciated because patients get here through you. They get educated through you. And you supporting the affiliate and them supporting you is a great marriage to have. I appreciate your attention. It's been a pleasure coming here. I know it was kind of quick in and out, and Tony may give you the details of our trip. But thank you again. I appreciate it.